This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview. On today's programme, we're going to be hearing from the Borders clubs that are playing tomorrow and hear what the coaches have to say about their matches in the Premiership, the National and of course the East Leagues as well. Dale Clancy is with me again. We start in National 1 for a change because there's no doubt what the big game is tomorrow. The clash at Pointer Park between top of the table Kelso and third placed Melrose. 6 points separating the two teams, plenty at stake, and right away let's hear from the two clubs, starting with Kelso Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan.
Earlier in the season, we narrowly lost 16-14 up at Greenyards, and it was a game we could have won, but in fairness to Melrose, they were good on the day, and they probably deserved their win that day. We've got to take that on the chin and learn from it, and I think we have done since then. We've only dropped 4 or 5 points, I think, since then. The reaction's been really good. Again, this week, it's another game, another hurdle towards trying to finish top of this league, and you know, with Ayr and Melrose on our heels, it's just not going to be easy. There's going to be no let-up right till the end of the season, so we've got to keep pushing hard and hopefully get another win on Saturday. We know just how difficult it'll be. This is a really cracking Melrose outfit. They've been around the block several times. They've won trophies galore. I mean, the players that are in their team some of them have won umpteen leagues and cups and different things, Sevens trophies, you name it, they've been in it. So they're used to playing at this end of the table. There's never a season goes by you don't recognise a Melrose team in a top 4 of a league nowadays. They're always thereabouts. So they're used to this. Ayr are similar. So it's a bit new to our guys, and we're learning on the job, and that's great. And you know, we're maybe a little bit ahead of where we thought we might be as a club when we set out on this journey, 18 months ago when we first started playing league rugby again after COVID, and we've come a long, long way, and the players have deserved this opportunity, and hopefully they can grab it with both hands. But if not, they've done everything they can and they've prepared well. And on Saturday, if we can give it all, hopefully that's enough, and I think it will be. If we're on it, we can do it. But again, the players are looking to improve on that performance at the Greenyards and see if we can go one better, and that would maintain our position at the top of the league. A few injuries. So last week, Liam Tate drops out with an injury, Archie Cummins drops out with an injury, and Aaron Lund drops out of contention because of a head knock with the Sharks. So that's 3 back rowers in 1 week. So it's testing our depth. But fortunately, we have a bit of depth at Kelso at the moment. And Kevin Dryden comes back at the team. He gets a start at 7. And, Kevin's a fairly experienced operator at this level, so he shouldn't be phased. And Fergus Common gets a well-deserved place on the bench. Fergus has been outstanding for the Sharks this year, so he gets a well-deserved chance, and I'm sure these guys are looking forward to getting involved. Everyone at the club is behind the team, and we're looking for another big crowd on the day, which I'm sure there will be. And we let this rivalry take place again, and enjoy the spectacle for what it is, and let the best team win.
Neil Hinnigan playing his cards very close to his chest once again, bigging up the opposition, and a man with a poker face.
Yeah, he does work this pretty well when he's speaking about opposition. Remember back to the beginning of the season, and he was always talking about Kelso's, looking to try and keep away from relegation. Trying to keep the boys' feet on the ground. I think he's, as a director of rugby, he's been around the block for a young director of rugby. He's got a lot of experience in the game, and he's a passionate Kelso guy, and he wants to make sure that they get the best outcome for Kelso. So, he talks well. He's helped develop a great culture at Kelso Rugby Club after he's returned from his time at Heriots, and I think he's a big nucleus as to how Kelso have performed this season in terms of their success. But obviously themselves, a great season so far. They're still sitting top of the pile. It's getting quite congested and tight. A lot of big games coming up at the end of National 1, and it is, as he says, going to test their depth with the changes in the back row. But I think Kevin Dryden he's a very able replacement. He's usually very impactful off the bench, but it's certainly shaped up to be a good game.
Well, a Melrose bonus point win with Kelso getting nothing not only lets Ayr in with a potential table topping opportunity, but of course it would put Melrose just 1 point behind Kelso in the table, and things would be even tighter. So much at stake.
Yeah, and I think the focus now slightly looks on at National 1 because of, obviously last weekend everything was settled pretty much in the Premiership in terms of the actual campaign, the marathon of the campaign, now moves into the playoffs. But in terms of that, for a neutral, there's results in there that you would probably like to see this league go right down to the wire. Melrose will know this is their last opportunity to get promotion this season. If they lose at the weekend, they are not going up. I do not believe they've got any chance in going up, because they would then rely on a big swing in points. Kelso and Ayr would have to choke, and Melrose would have to go on an unbelievable run. So you wonder where the pressure is in this game, actually, because Kelso are top of the pile. They've been chased for a long, long time, but Melrose, with the history that they have in rugby, will be feeling a lot of pressure to make sure that they grasp this opportunity, because once it's gone, they're going to have to reset for next season.
Well, let's hear from head coach Bert Grigg.
Probably the biggest game of the season for us left. It's the last time we play one of the two teams above us, so a real opportunity for us to close that gap from Kelso. Kelso sitting 6 points ahead of us, so any type of victory in our favour certainly keeps that hunt on for the league title. We had a pretty physical encounter last week against Biggar, which is almost the best preparation for playing Kelso, play a similar brand in terms of the forward pack looking to build a bit of dominance, and then their backs try and put them in the right area. So look, we're under no illusions that we've got to try and get some of that home form that we've had at the Greenyards and travel down to Poynter and really come out fighting from the get-go. Not many changes for us this week. A pretty settled squad. A few guys, Carey and Niggles from last week, I've managed to return to a bit of fitness, so bolstered in a few areas on the pitch, and yeah, hopefully that's going to be the difference with us getting over the line come Saturday afternoon.
And of course a chance for them to get the double over Kelso. And you remember last season, of course, they did the double over Heriots, who went up and got promoted.
He opened that with a really interesting statement, saying it's the biggest game of the season that they've got left. And that's true if they lose this game. It's definitely not true if they win it, because then every game after that becomes their biggest game of the season, because the way the top of the national one's poised, it's just, it's really fine margins, and there's still a lot of games to play in terms of, the one that sticks out is Ayr coming down to Poynter Park. So, this weekend's going to be huge, but I believe what he says as well, in terms of that. I think you couldn't have got a better game as preparation against Biggar. They're a sticky team, they're physical, they play direct rugby, but they do have backs that like to spread the ball. So I think they have, had a bit of a hit out against a similar opponent. But it's a huge game. It's a huge game for both of these teams. Kelso have not been in the Premiership for so long, and they will know what is at stake, and that's what I'm on about. You don't really know where the pressure lies. Usually you've got an underdog and you've got somebody who, the pressure's on. I just feel they're sharing it in equal amounts in this game.
So it's quite exciting, really, looking at the 5 games that they each have to play, starting with Ayr. They've just got the one home game. Tomorrow they're at GHK, who are kind of mid-table to the bottom end. Then they're at home to Biggar, and then 3 away matches. Kelso, Gala, the 2 biggies there, and then the end at Stuart's Melville. Kelso have got 2 home games out of their 5. Home against Melrose, and then they're on the road to Watsonanes, but they've got Ayr crucially at home after that, and then they're away at GHK, and finally to Highland. Whereas Melrose, 2 home games for them, away at Kelso, home to Highland, away at Gala, which is going to be really interesting, Stuart's Melville away, and Dundee at home. So again, so tough to call, but if Ayr are going to do it, I think they've got the hardest run in.
There is a couple of easy games in there, and sorry to Stuart's Melville, but that is on paper an easy game. GHK are 2 points above the trap door at the moment, and they're a good team when they turn it on. And Kelso and Ayr have to play them. They're difficult games. The Melrose Gala game, I'm focusing there when you're speaking on the Kelso versus Ayr. The Kelso Ayr games that they've got left, because you do feel that even with a Melrose win, you're still relying on one of those teams to continue to fall. But they're all difficult games, especially I'm looking at the ones like GHK and Watsonians. They're 9th and 8th in the league. They can play good rugby, especially Watsonians. They have been putting in some good performances, bearing in mind where they were, a couple of months ago. They were towards the foot of the table. And
they were 2 points behind Ayr with 14 men for most of the match.
Yeah, so they know how, they can put in a performance. So it's going to be still a long way to go in the league. 5 games left for them all, and a lot of really difficult games for them to come as well. So, it's going to be interesting, but I just feel that this weekend, it's going to be a 2-horse race if Melrose lose. So if they lose this game, it's a shootout between Kelso and Ayr to see who's going to get back in the Prem.
It was exciting last season. It's probably even more exciting this time.
Yeah, it definitely is. I can't preempt the spectacle that it's going to be at Poynter, but hands down, it was, in terms of senior rugby last year in amateur rugby, Kelso versus Melrose at Poynter Park was by far my favourite game that we covered. I could have done without Neil Hinnigan just about rattling himself out of the commentary box, but you've seen the passion, you've seen how much it meant for Kelso, and you felt like it was a bit of a building process for them then as well. They then truly believed, look, we can mix it with Melrose, because they had a good season last year as well. So it was a phenomenal game. It was blood and guts, and I'll be expecting similar this weekend.
Well, also in National 1 tomorrow, Gala at home to Stuart's Melville, and you would fancy certainly a home win there with Stu Mel at the bottom. Here's the thoughts of Gala player coach Ewan Dodds.
Although we won quite convincingly last weekend, we know as a squad that we can perform much better, and we need to be much more clinical when opportunities present themselves. So we look forward to this challenge, and then we see how we can go for the rest of the season. We've got a pretty settled squad again, with only one change, with Murray Wilson coming back into the squad after injury last week, and John Turnbull dropping out through injury. So it's pretty settled that way, so we look forward to seeing what we can do, and are excited with the prospect of Stu Mel coming to Netherdale.
Well, Gala's run in is very interesting as well, because they've got 4 home games and their only away matches against Stirling County, who are at the moment going through a pretty bad patch. So they've got Stumel at home, then Stirling away, then Melrose at home, and of course there'll be no fears for them at all. The pressure completely off, and a bit of history there as well, since they beat Melrose on their own patch convincingly in the Waverley Cup. Bigger at home, and then of course the biggie there, Ayr at home. So they're going to fancy their chances of winning all of them, and they could easily help decide who goes up.
You just feel from Gala's point of view, after the change in coaching, that they have really changed the way that they're performing. When we watched them against Melrose at the Greenyards, it was a really, really difficult performance to kind of take in from a Gala point of view. It was flat, they looked bullied, and then a few weeks later they completely turn it around against Melrose. So that game itself is the one that stands out. That's the big game for Gala this season. Is a big day at Netherdale. They could potentially take the wheels off of the Melrose juggernaut if they win this weekend. So it's a big occasion for Gala, but it is, like we've said weeks gone by, this is now a building process for them to get back into contention next season.
Well, let's go into the Premiership. Hawick could carry their bat right the way through the league with an 18th match unbeaten. They're at Glasgow Hawks, and head coach is Matty Douglas.
We're excited to get into our last league game this weekend. It's a tough trip to Hawks and up at Glasgow. Always a tough game. It's probably somewhere we've struggled a little bit in the past to win. But look, it's our last league game, and the boys are they're fired up to get into it. This is obviously our prep into a massive week for the club next week. So look, we're excited for it, and I think looking on the whole as a season, it's been a fantastic season for the playing group and the squad down at Hawick. I think to do what we've done in terms of staying unbeaten at home, to finish the top of the table for the first time in 20 odd year, and also we have a chance on Saturday to actually finish the league campaign unbeaten, which would be a huge achievement for the players. They've put in a massive amount of work, so they deserve it. They've worked extremely hard, some players harder than others, to work and to get their sell into the team. So it's a game on Saturday we're definitely looking forward to. Hawks are a team that can beat anybody on their day, performance wise, maybe not been where they needed to be the last couple of weeks, but look, we're expecting a backlash on Saturday coming. It's our last league game at home, so they'll be looking to put in a big performance, so we need to match that. I know our performances haven't quite been there the last couple of weeks, and probably just down to a little bit of pressure on our shoulders, but the boys have trained well this week, and look, we're focused these next 2 weeks. This is a massive sort of prep going into Mar next weekend, as Mar, they've not played in 3 or 4 weeks, so we need to be ready to go come next week. But first and foremost, the challenge is Hawks on Saturday, and to finish the league campaign unbeaten, that's definitely at the front of the mind this week. And the added incentive, if we win as well, then that'll be the most ever wins in concession on the Bill McLaren Shield, so that would be a fitting end to the season as well. So look, we're under no illusion it'll be a massive test, but again we're excited for it. There's a real buzz around the club, and there's definitely a good feeling going into these next couple of weeks, and we need that. We need to be confident. There's no point shying away now. We've done a lot of the hard work, so it's now up to us to perform at the business end. So looking at team wise, a couple of changes just due to some probably forced changes, just one eye on next week, and a couple of little niggles for the GHA game, as that was a massive battle last week. Credit to GHA, they put up a huge fight, and obviously we wish them all the best in that one next year, and hopefully we can see them bounce straight back up. But team news wise, front row is Sean Muir, Fraser Rennick, Rory McLeod. In the middle row is Sean Fairbairn and Connor Sutherland. Back row of Stuart Graham, Callum Rennick and Jay Linton. Back line is Gareth Welsh at 9, Kyle Brunton at 10. In the centres we have Ethan Riley and Andrew Mitchell, and a back three of Ronan McKean, Charlie Welsh and Kirk Ford. On the bench is Ross Graham, Tom Hope, Hugh Donaldson, Declan Lightfoot and Grant Huggins. So it's great to see a few of the boys who have been playing at the Force the last couple of weeks getting an opportunity this weekend, and again we roll into a massive week next week.
It's certainly been a big season for Hawick, and good to see them retaining a very strong squad still despite injuries.
Yeah, definitely, and it's you see that they've got a couple of personnel changes, especially in that front row. Rory McLeod taking his opportunity. I thought he played well against Jed, in the cup a few weeks ago. So you see him back in contention. It just shows that the pressure in terms of the competition for places is there in the Hawick squad, and I think that's been probably the foundation of what's got them to where they are this season. They've been formidable against especially the top opponents. Now, when I'm thinking about what Matty was saying there in terms of their performance levels have dropped, obviously that was a closer game against GHA than perhaps they would have thought about at the start of the blast off at the whistle. They probably thought they were going to just romp at home. But this is now going to be a really big game in terms of how they feel going into the playoffs. Because, yes, they played well against the big teams, but they played well against the big teams in league rugby, and where there's not as much pressure because that you've got the safety net of next week. This is then starting to get on. They've got 3 games now in terms of the league campaign. If Hawick win the next 3 games, they are league champions. If they win their next game, they're unbeaten throughout the season. If they lose any of their next 2, they're not going to be league champions, and that is when the pressure starts to come on. So I fully want Hawick to win the league. That's not me saying I'm a Hawick fan. I'm just fully wanting Hawick to win the league because they have been head and shoulders above everybody else. And hopefully then, in terms of the playoffs, you have a true winner because they have been the best. But this is when it matters. If they want to have the successful season that they've built up to now, it's putting in the performances in the next few weeks to get that crown.
Well, you've just brought up the hot topic. I wasn't going to mention it this week, but seeing as you brought it up, I will mention it, because I did actually have a chat with Phil Smith before the game. Don't know if you heard that, because you weren't here last week, but last weekend. But Phil Smith was saying that the Heriots, from a Heriots perspective, the players enjoy the playoff situation, even though they're not actually involved with it, as it's turned out. But of course, it does give teams who probably just haven't got the strong enough squad to actually compete at the very top level to have a chance of getting in and becoming Scottish champions under the radar. Now, to me, that's got a credibility problem as far as your league straight away. And it will happen one day that we're going to get the 4th team, who are like 26 points behind the league leaders, suddenly becoming Scottish champions. And what does that say for the credibility of the whole league? I get the point that he's talking about. There will be clubs who will enjoy having an extra 2 games for revenue point of view, losing the credibility of the actual Premiership itself.
I don't know, I just think sports slightly changed. I think a league format, and I like a league format. I like top to bottom, and you play each other twice, and whoever's at the top is the best team in the league. Everybody's aware of that, but I just think there's that added pressure to really prove that you're the best team by going into a different environment after the league. I think it does for a neutral. For me, watching it, watching Hawick versus Mar last year in the semi-final was Hawick's chance to perhaps get to the final, to have a shot at being the champions, because Hawick finished that they would have finished 3rd because they played the team in 2nd at the time were Mar. Mar then went on to win the league against Curry, who had went the whole season pretty much unbeaten. They lost against Hawick in the first game, then went unbeaten until they met Mar. Now, I don't think that reduces the credibility, because the spectacle that it was brilliant. Mar's support, they had their one day in the spotlight that they've building up for years and years and years. And if the league had finished a few weeks before, they wouldn't have had that. So they got an opportunity to, to have one last swing at the team who should be champions and steal it from them. And I think in terms of sport, I think that adds a good spectacle to it.
Yeah, well, you see that the playoffs last year, I was watching both of them. I couldn't get excited because I still felt Curry are the champions. That's in my own sort of way of looking at it. And it could have been a great game, of course, but that's why we have the cup. We have a cup, we have a knockout, which happens probably in March. And that's when you do your knockout rugby.
But I'm probably then the other side now, because I just think the Scottish Cup that is in the format it is now is in any way, shape or form that really captivating, because they've diluted it and changed it and swapped it and mixed it about for years and years and years, which you think of any other historic cup that you've got in your head just now, you're probably thinking you like that because it's had continuity, it's had a little bit of, it's sustained in terms of the calendar. The Scottish Cup for me, in terms of Scottish rugby, is a bit of a gap filler. I just can't buy into it just now.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because I think the format has changed. It's not as exciting as it used to be. I mean, when you go back to when like Nicky Walker was winning 24,000 people at Murrayfield, you don't get that now. You get sort of 4,000 if you're lucky, and a bit more if there's a border team involved. So yeah, I agree the Cup needs a good look at, but I still think Cup rugby is Cup rugby, and I still think League rugby is League rugby. But there you go.
I think that's the thing. You're catering to so many different people, and the brilliant thing about this is the fact that there's some things I like in rugby, some things that you like in rugby. Our views will never always align, but in terms of the product that we've got just now, going back to Hoyk's performance at the start of the season, they know what they need to do to be champions. They've started off the first part of that remit pretty well. This comes to the second part to get the job done, and that's when the pressure comes on in this brilliant structure that we've got, Stuart.
Right, let's move on. The Premiership and Selkirk, they're at Curry tomorrow, hoping to get another memorable away win. Remember, they've only lost once away, and that was to Edinburgh Accies. Let's hear from Scott White, the head coach.
A wee bit disappointed as a squad in terms of obviously performance-based last week, and then also, fortunately, it becomes a wee bit of a dead rubber. Curry's obviously cemented second in a home semi, and we finish in fifth. But look, as we've said to the boys, there's still plenty to play for. We've obviously got the Border League final now, which was obviously confirmed as Monday the 20th of March against Melrose, and then we obviously come into the second round of the Cup, which is on the 25th of March against Musselburgh. So it's about us as coaches, the squad and stuff, and pulling some energy back into the squad. James Head probably come back in the middle row after his kind of 20-25 minute period on the pitch last week, and then backs wise maybe look at giving Blake Cullen and Finlay Whelans a run now that Finlay's obviously been out kind of long-term injury, so look at get Finlay back involved in the first 15 and give him a run this weekend as well, and Blake Cullen will come in on the wing also after good performances in the second. So yeah, look, we're looking forward to it, and it'll be a challenge. Curry they've obviously had a great season, so but I think it's a great opportunity for the boys just to go up there, chuck the ball about and have some fun.
I think you got blown away there. Scott White, head coach of Selkirk. Curry, of course, could potentially rest a few players for the playoff semis next week. I don't know if they will or not. I haven't seen their team. Selkirk, though, wanting to bounce back after what was a very disappointing performance. Yeah,
they've pretty much lost, two winnable games. That could have been 8 points that would have sealed fourth position in the league, and they'll be disappointed, but I don't think you can really argue with either of the results that they lost. I'm talking about the Musselburgh game and the Heriot's game, both at home. They finished 8th and 9th in the league, both with those wins. One of them had lost that game, one of them could have potentially gone down. So, they're vital wins for Heriot's and Musselburgh, but they're the two wins that have kind of come unstuck for Selkirk, because those points would have been vital for them getting into the playoffs. But, it's been a successful campaign for Selkirk and obviously we'll come on to Jed in a minute, but in terms of Selkirk, they've had a really positive campaign. They've built on what was probably a disappointing one last year, along with Jed Forrest. They were flirting with the foot of the table. They've been able to stabilise themselves this year, and Selkirk from nowhere gave themselves a real shot at potentially getting in the playoffs. It's just going to be interesting to watch how they evolve now with the changing coaching staff. So obviously Scott White going to the Knights, there'll be I would suggest there's going to be some players would depart along with that. So it's going to be interesting to see how Celtic adapt next season with a new coaching setup, which I think looks, and obviously with their announcement, is a good strong coaching setup which retains a couple of their key individuals.
Well, as Scott says, they've got an eye on the Border League final Monday the 20th of March. That's been confirmed. It's at Netherdale, and a cup tie against Musselburgh at home next month. So they'll be using this to prepare for those two games. Both could lead to silverware.
Yeah, and I think they'll be glad that the Border League's away from home. They've got Melrose at Netherdale, and that's going to be an interesting game in itself. We spoke to Stuart Hutchison a few weeks ago, and we're talking about their performance level, Melrose, and all of a sudden he was saying we've got a Border League final, we can almost get promotion, we're top of Kings of the Sevens. So Melrose I think that's going to be a really, really tight battle. It'll be interesting, especially at Netherdale as well, because it's a nice wide pitch and both teams like to chuck the ball about. So it's going to be a good Border League final, but you would imagine that Celtic are probably in the better position to prepare for that than Melrose, because they've got the huge game this weekend.
Jed Forest, they haven't got a game now in 15s all season, which is a bit of a surprise really for them, because we've always seen them trying to prepare for the Sevens and having 15s games still to play. So now they can actually concentrate. And what's interesting, of course, we've had 3 rounds already. Jed Forest 0 points, so they can really give it a go now, because top of the table is 20, and that's Gala.
Yeah, and I think if that's the worst thing for any other Border team, is to give Jed about a 16-month run in to get ready for the Sevens. That's the disappointing thing with the Premiership. I think there's too much of a gap, but I do know why there's a gap. There's a gap because the players are preparing for Super 6. There's a lot of players who are going to obviously leave that level of rugby. They're going to make that step up to the semi-pro, so they obviously need a little bit of a break before they get into that, because I know that the teams are obviously preparing for that as we speak. So Jed Forest, from their standpoint, some players might find their way to the Knights. I know there was a couple of players against the Falcons, but in terms of Sevens, it's a scary thought to think what they're going to be like if they get a few months prep under their belt. It's
going to make it really exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you look at all the teams at the moment, and I think in terms of the Kings of the Sevens, and this is where the beauty for me, where Super 6 has helped us, is that there's, I think all the teams look a little bit more even now. All the teams have a couple of big ball carriers. They've all got skillful players. The skill level in each club has went up. And you think of teams, Hawick, what position will they be in? Because obviously they've still got a lot of rugby to play, but they'll get the break as well. So you've got Hawick, you've got Selkirk, who are good at Sevens. You've got Jed Forest, who get a good lead in as well. Melrose, Gala, Kelso. So Kelso and Peebles and teams like that will probably be the ones that don't get as good a lead-in time because of the fixtures that will congest them as well, and preparation for promotion and things. But I think it's going to be a really interesting end to the Kings of the Sevens.
And actually, talk of Kings of the Sevens, I've got the table at the moment. Gala on the top, 20. Watsonians 18, Melrose 17, Peebles 13, Emberackies 11, Hawick 10, Kelso 6, Selkirk 5, Berwick 3, Jed Forest 0. Peebles in 4th place there, 13 points. They've had a good start, haven't they?
Yeah, Peebles had a good start. They found success at the Gala Sevens. Had a good tournament there, and you look at Selkirk. There was a lot of ex-players came back to play for them. So I think the table, when you look at it on paper, it doesn't paint the full picture. But that's where teams can push off from. And I know Peebles, obviously that's. Obviously that was the team I played for, and I know that they're looking at the Kings of the Sevens as a bit of a development tool to try and attract and retain players. Give them a platform to play some rugby, be involved in tournaments, try to get to the later rounds to find success, because they've only ever won their own tournament. So they've never found success elsewhere, although they've been in a couple of finals. So, in terms of the Kings of the Sevens, it's a great platform for the young players to chuck the ball about and try and, make a name for themselves.
Well, we'll certainly have plenty of Sevens talk in the months and weeks to come. April the 8th, of course, is the Melrose Sevens. That's round 4, and then it goes all the way through to a finale at Selkirk this year, just as a one-off because of the coronation. So more on that still to come. But on to National 2 and talk of Peebles. They're at home at Boroughmuir. Head coach delivering his report in the wind with child in tow is the multitasking Ian Chisholm.
They're probably resigned to the fact that they're already relegated, and they're about 20 points behind Dumfries. There's massive danger of us coming up against a team that they can play without any sort of consequence. They can just rip loose and push passes and make decisions that they wouldn't usually. And if you look at their the results. They're always in the game, and they ran Wade close last week. They absolutely battered Kirkcaldy the week before that, and then the week before that even they took 21 points off a high flying Falkirk, despite getting beat. So that should be respected, and it's probably been a really weak point of ours this season is just scoring that fourth try. And Murdo Anderson, Jack Harrison, Dave Collins, Finlay Sinclair, Ross Brown, they all missed out through injury, but Scott Stuart, Cammy Pye, Kenny Clyde, they all return. And Rob Harrison moves from the centre into the back row, which I'm sure he'll be delighted with, and I move from the bench to inside centre alongside James Dow. Caelan McKeever partners his cousin Donald Anderson in the half-back pairings, and Buster Davidson and Neil Pate, they keep their starting spot after really solid defensive and attacking performances against Accies last week. I really loved their ambition to play and their ambition to keep the ball alive in those wide channels. And same starting front row as last weekend with John Gray, John Napier, Lewis Copeland, and these guys are the future of the club, and they're learning all the time from Willie Aitken and Neil Hogarth, as well as guided on a lot of forward play by our forwards coach Graham Patterson. Sean Brotherston keeps his place in the second row. He's really impressed me with his all-round engagement, particularly what he's doing off the field. He's asking questions. He partners with Cammy Pye because Ross Brown he's got a muscle injury, so it's good to have Cammy back involved after a couple of weeks off. Bench, we are back to our usual 4 forwards and 0 back split. And we've just had to get used to that, and it is what it is. Willie Aitken and Neil Hogarth, they are like fine wines, they'll impact off the bench with Kenny Clyde. He's back on shore after being away on the rigs for a wee while. Evan McKeever makes up the last spot on the bench, and we're hoping for a 5-point win, and we can chip away at this league.
Wonderful stuff. There about that. You've got this all to come, of course, haven't you?
Yeah, I just wish that Ian actually gave Greg Rayburn the microphone there. We could hear him chittering away in the background. But, again, it's a great win for Peoples last week on the road. Glasgow Accies, a team that were flying really high. They've kind of, hit a few stumbling blocks in recent weeks. But I just like the way Ian Chisholm speaks with so much enthusiasm, and I was speaking to Greg Rayburn earlier on today, and he is saying exactly the same thing. He's been having conversations with them, speaking about what they're trying to do next year, and for me, being a People supporter, I was a bit nervous because of the vacancies that were available on the borders, but it does sound like he's looking to stay, which I think, in terms of Peoples, and if they have any aspirations of pushing on, I think he's a big part of that to push on, for that club, because he has got a really good rugby brain. I think the players buy into the culture, they buy into the direction of the club. So and he's saying with confidence there they want another 5-point win so they can chip away at the league and see what happens. Because obviously only one team goes up, and they're a bit away from that. But anything can happen.
Berwick certainly want to produce last week's form on the road tomorrow against a Kirkcaldy team that dropped from 5th to 9th in 1 week last week and into that relegation zone of 5 teams. So what does Berwick head coach Colin Young think about this one?
Well, much the same squad as last weekend, pretty much unchanged. But what we do need to do is start winning away from home. We have picked up a couple of victories away from home this season, but probably not enough. This weekend really need to go for it. I think it'll be a good open game. That's the way we'll be looking to play it. Down at Berwick, Cody looked like they wanted to throw it around earlier on in the season also. So here's to a decent game of attacking rugby.
62 points last week for Berwick, more or less the same squad, and they know a win at Kirkcaldy will take them further away from that drop zone. Absolutely vital for them. Yeah,
I think this is a big game. Looking at the league, 5 teams go down, and Kirkcaldy, as you mentioned before, we heard from Colin Young. Kirkcaldy fell into that trapdoor after last weekend, but they've got 2 games in hand, and a win here, a 5-point win, tucks them alongside Berwick, and they'll be wanting to make sure they keep them at an arm's length. So any sort of points, I think, on the road here against Kirkcaldy will give them a real chance of staying in that little truncated part in the middle of the league to make sure that they maintain their position, as high as possible for next season. Kirkcaldy, they can turn it on. They've got performances in them, especially at home. So it's going to be a difficult game, but you look at how tight that league is there. You would say that the bottom 3, Hamilton, Cartha and Boroughmuir, they're down. But then you've got anybody from Kirkcaldy, Dumfries, Wade, Preston Lodge, Berwick. Any 2 of them can go as well. So, it's again, we talk about the Premiership being done. There's still so much rugby to play in that one and that too.
Well, East 1 sees Duns at home to Leith, while in Division 2 the derby between Langham and Hoyt Lindeen is off due to lack of players again this week for Lindeen. Let's hear from Langham's captain Nathan Smith.
This weekend was supposed to be our last home league game of the season against Hoyt Lindeen. Unfortunately, Lindeen informed us last weekend that they wouldn't be playing the remaining fixtures. Very disappointing for us. It's one that we look for in the fixture list every year. Hoyt Lindeen home and away, it's our nearest rivals, and it's one of the biggest days at our club, so really disappointed that they won't be making the trip down. Especially with the season that we've had, obviously managing to secure the league win against Dalkeith, it would have been nice to have the opportunity just to finish the job off at home this weekend. But we put some messages out last week, and Annan have came back and they're sending a team over, so we've still got a game this weekend. Give the boys that last run out at home in front of a good home crowd, we're hoping. It's been a great few weeks since that Dalkeith game. Obviously the celebrations that night went on well into the night, and probably the next day. Just amazing to finally do it. We've been at it for a few years now and come close, but to finally do it's been great. A few of us went up to the minis training on the next Tuesday, and it's showing them what it's all about to come up into the first team and hopefully give them some inspiration and show that the first team is a winning team. And just walking around the town, people shaking your hand for your achievements and stuff like that, it's a real buzz. So hopefully going up next year the buzz continues, and I know there's a few of the young lads keen to come up and start training with us, so no, it's been amazing.
Obviously a disappointment for the Langham players there who wanted to turn this into a bit of a party this weekend. They do have a match against Annan anyway, which is good news. And good to hear the good feeling in the town as a result of them winning the championship, inspiring the youngsters.
Yeah, definitely. You know, they came so close last year in what was a huge year for their club. You know, they're such a historic club in terms of Borders Rugby. You know, they've had a long history in Borders Rugby and find themselves in an unfortunate position. If you look at it in terms of the league pyramids, they're a bit further down, but you know, it's great that they got that success this year and they've been able to get promotion and had a really good campaign. And I get the disappointment from Nathan Smith there. I know that it's disappointing that game can't be fulfilled, but we know the troubles that you get to when you get a little bit further down the leagues, how hard it is to sustain a team, and especially sustain a team that have been playing towards the end of the table for most of the season, and that probably, you know, compounds the reasons as to why they can't fulfil it. But, you know, great feeling, great that they've been going and getting themselves involved in the junior section and the feel-good factor around the town. It's nice to see that, you know, people are congratulating them for eventually managing to get that promotion, and well done to them.
Well, Lindeen clearly going through a hard time at the moment, as you mentioned, so we asked the club's Gary Alexander to bring us up to date with matters off the pitch.
It's very disappointing that we're not making the journey down to Milltown this Saturday. Injuries have really taken their toll. We're now up to 10 long-term injuries, resulting in us no being in a position to fulfil last Saturday's match at Dalkeith or this weekend at Langham. The position, it's gotten so bad we couldn't see a way of playing either game, even at a later point. However, the SRU have been extremely helpful, and I know individuals within the club have been working extremely hard for the past week and more to try and find a way of possibly playing one or both of the games. It's been a really tough season for us, as I've mentioned before, and to be honest, it's absolutely gutting to be in the position that we are, for ourselves obviously, but also because, well, we feel for our opponents. We didn't want to be letting them down. They've both made the journey to the volunteer this season, and we well know how vital bar revenue etc. is in the current times more than ever. I simply didn't know at this stage how things will unravel, but we've certainly not given up hope of taking it to the field again this season before regrouping for 2023-24.
Gary Alexander, and they're obviously as gutted as anyone else not to be able to fulfil this fixture, but they're trying to get it played for sure. But it does bring into the focus again the difficulty in trying to put out several teams in the town. I mean, there's obviously Hoyt, there's Hoyt Force, Hoyt Harlequins, Hoyt Lindeen.
Yeah, I remember years ago when I think it was when Hoyt Quins were in the final at Murrayfield, was it not? Deke Armstrong. I remember having a conversation with him after the game, and you know, when we were talking about it, I was saying the same, because I'm as confused as anybody until you get into Hawick and the clubs, and you see the history that, you know, everybody is very proud of their own club, and so they should be. But obviously, in current times, there's probably a different way that people could do it in terms of that town, and if it all came together, you know, there'd be a huge force in terms of Scottish rugby. But you know, well, they are just now in terms of Hawick. But it's a shame to see the other teams, you know, not being able to sustain it, and there's maybe not a place for, you know, for all of those clubs in the town. However, I do like, you know, how transparent that was, you know, to explain the current position that they're in. They want to try and get, you know, the games fulfilled before you know, next season comes anyway. But you know, I dare say I bet a few of those players go down to Milltown to put some money over the bar this weekend, because, you know, if one thing that all rugby clubs are good at, they're good at rugby etiquette. They know how to behave, and I'm sure that a lot of the Quins players will be going down and drinking with the Langham boys and wishing them success.
Into East 3 then, and a cracker in prospect. Top of the table, Edinburgh Northern at home to second placed, unbeaten in the league, Hawick Harlequins. We spoke to Quins captain Adam Hall.
Yeah, we're all really looking forward to the game this weekend up in Edinburgh. It's sure to be a big one against Edinburgh Northern, who've clearly been one of the better sides in the league this year, winning all their games bar the one against us in Hawick, where we put in one of our better performances of the season. So we're certainly expecting a tougher game up in Edinburgh. It's kind of been a running theme for us that we've got a few unavailable for this weekend away from home, but still really positive that we're putting out a really strong squad that we think is capable of winning this game. We're welcoming a good few players back that missed last week's trip to Gala. So Gav Douglas has been out for a little while, experienced standoff. He's coming back in. We're hoping that Ross Aitken, another experienced centre, is going to be fit for this weekend. And Liam Smith, another back that missed last weekend, is coming back into the squad. Neil Anderson's been out with a hamstring strain for a couple of weeks, so he's a good player to have back in at scrum half. And his brother also missed last weekend and is back in the pack. Ross Nichol, one that missed last week's game with illness, comes back in, and he's raring to go. So on the whole, it's a really strong squad that we think's more than capable of getting a result up in Edinburgh, and we're just trying to relish the fact that it's a really big game and certainly potentially a league decider. We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's a big game in terms of the league, because there's obviously a bit of a disparity in terms of the games that they've played, but there's a realistic opportunity that Hawick could get, you know, top of the pile, and it's a huge game. I think if they lose against Edinburgh Northern, then the realistic chances of being able to get promotion are gone. But certainly this gives them a good chance. And in the Quins team, there's a lot of experience, a lot of players that have played throughout, you know, different Hawick clubs. Some for the main Hawick team, some of the other teams as well. So, you know, they've got experience within the ranks, and it'll be a big weekend for them if they can get the win.
Hawick Harlequins played 8, won 8. Edinburgh Northern played 11, won 10. So it's a wee bit deceptive looking at it. There's 15 points obviously between them, but of course, you know, even if Hawick Harlequins do lose that, they've still got games that they can pick the points up on. So it's, but as you said in the past, it's good to have money in the bank.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, games in hand are always a bit of a nervous time, and you know, 3 games in hand, you get bonus point wins for all of them, then you get your 15 points. But you know, that's in dreamland if you're able to get them, and wins don't come, you know, cheap at any level of sport, because sometimes you get a little bit too complacent. And you know, Quins have obviously put a good run of games together, not conceding a lot of points as well. 65 points is all they've conceded. So in terms of defensively, they're not leaking a lot of points or scoring a lot as well. So this is a big game, because Edinburgh Northern could, you know, just steal a march on them if they're able to pick up the win.
It should be very, very entertaining indeed. And Hugh Brown will be down in Edinburgh for us for that one, reporting live on the programme tomorrow. Well, also in East League 3, Galloway M make the trip to Peffermill to take on Edinburgh University Medics, and their captain is Jake Maxwell.
Yeah, we're looking forward to Saturday. It's our first game against the Medics this season after a rearrangement pre-Christmas, and as ever they represent a dangerous side for us. They're traditionally fast, fit side, and they've had some good performances this season, I think, based on their results against the top half of the table. So it will be a challenge. But I think we absolutely set down a marker last weekend against the Quins, a performance that was full of heart, very gutsy. Our front up defence was hugely impressive against a side that have gone unbeaten in the league. And I think for huge parts of the game we managed to impose ourselves on them. Set piece in particular was a real positive. And then when we did get the chance to play our structures and go through a few phases, we managed to cut them open and score a couple of good tries as well. So we'll take a lot of confidence from that. I think generally as a squad, there are absolute signs that the training and the work that we're doing midweek is filtering through to games. And I think in particular the games against Northern and Quins, who are the standard bearers this season, shows that we can impose ourselves on teams in this league. I think what we always struggle with is consistency, and that's what the challenge is against Medics, is just to keep that standard of performance from last week and take it into this. So we've spoken a lot about continuing that development, making sure that we play our structures regardless of bodies being swapped in, regardless of who the opponent is. We play our own YM brand of rugby, if you will. From my own point of view, I'm hugely encouraged to see our heavy ball carrying number 8, Ben Reid, coming back this week. He always adds a nice bit of grunt up front. Ball carrying is outstanding, gets us over the gain line, which is hugely important for the rest of our game. And then I think just to complete that puzzle, we've also got our regular 10 coming back, Stuart Walker, who definitely will organise the midfield. He's a very calm head back there. Make sure that structure is being played in the way that we work on a weekly basis. So really positive, looking forward to the game, and we'll see how we go.
Good to hear from Jake Maxwell, the captain of Gala YM. Well, on Sunday, the Kelso ladies team are away at West of Scotland in the National Shield. They're finding it difficult at the moment to field a team through a mix of injuries and holidays, but we wish them all the best down at Burnbrae, a tough place to go. Well, finally, Dale, another rather big game going on in Paris on Sunday. Scotland travel to France to take on a very good French team, but they're going for 3 out of 3. At the time of recording, this team hasn't been announced yet. Who do you think Gregor Townsend will be putting in for this one?
I don't see many changes from the Wales team, to be honest. I think that the second half especially was a really, really, professional performance from Scotland. They looked slightly rattled in the first half. There was parts of it where you looked like, we could have come unstuck, and I think years gone by we probably would have, but we dug our heels in, especially, that last couple of minutes in Wales. They try and throw that ball out the back and they try and, release the winger, but it just obviously went in a touch. It kind of goes from there. We kind of passed over the yellow card, to be fair. During that time, we did well to cope without George Turner. I don't think there's going to be many changes. I'd be surprised if there was many changes in terms of the only things might be forced if there's anybody picked up any knocks from the opening kind of couple of games. But we've put ourselves in a really good position, and I think that even when you look at the fixtures, could you afford to get a reasonable result from France if you keep them at 4 points, you're able to maybe pick up one yourself. You've got Ireland at home and Italy to finish. I think it does make it a really interesting campaign how we've beaten England and beaten Wales. We've got the two best teams to come, but we have put ourselves in a good position, and I think that we are being spoken about as potential Six Nation winners. Outsiders, yes, but there is a chance there, and 2 wins from 2, especially going down to Twickenham and kind of beating the duck with Warren Gatland. That's 2 big performances from Scotland. So it's going to be an interesting weekend. It'll be. France are really, really good. They've, in terms of they're bringing through a whole clutch of young players over the last few years and really got that continuity. They're a great outfit, and they're gunning for their home World Cup as well. So it's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it depends what type of France is going to turn up as well.
And of course we're hearing all this talk that's going on behind the scenes at the moment. The SRU looking for a replacement, allegedly, for Gregor Townsend.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of replacements have been touted for Townsend. There's been chat as well, and a lot of ex-players, now pundits, Johnny Beattie being one, has wrote a column about retaining Gregor Townsend. And I would, ask me 3-4 months ago, and you would say, look, it's probably time for a change, because you've still got the thoughts of the fallout with Finn Russell, who is by far our best player. You've got that little fallout in your head, thinking about how he's managing the group, to coming to the point now. Finn Russell is playing some of the best rugby he's played in a while, and that's saying something, because he's always, for the last few years, 5 years, he's been absolutely formidable. But a lot of those other players, Fagerson, Matt Fagerson has been outstanding at the back of the scrum. Crosby's come in and covered in the back row and looked like he has nailed down his starting spot. So a lot of players he's bringing through as well, names that we're maybe not too familiar with, that he's really bought into. So you wonder, would it be the right call to change the head coach, or can they negotiate something, or is it time for Townsend to move on? And I think the next couple of games, in the lead up to the World Cup, obviously, but the next couple of games might just start to make his mind up. But we'll see where it goes.
Well, it's going to be very intriguing stuff, no question about it. But that's it for today. We're going to be here tomorrow at 2 o'clock for a cracking Borders Rugby special, Kelso versus Melrose. It's our featured commentary in National 1 with first against third. We'll have Dale Clancy and Robin Purdy on the commentary team there. Hope you can join us for all that, plus all the score updates as they happen. And to tune in, just go to our homepage at bordersrugby.net and press the Listen Live button. It's as simple as that. Thanks for listening tonight, and from Dale and I, bye for now.